Long before I ever put on the gray uniform and clipped the badge to my belt, I'd already lived 1,000 nights in places just like Target. Empty parking lots, flickering fluorescent lights, echoing hallways. It had become my rhythm after the divorce. Some men fill the silence with TV, some drown it in whiskey. Me, I chose the graveyard shift. It was steady pay, no bosses breathing down my neck, and most nights all I had to worry about was a kid trying to sneak beer or a vagrant curled up in the restroom. But if I'm honest, that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was I didn't know what to do with myself outside of work. After my ex-wife, Kelly, left me in 2010, the house felt like a tomb. Our daughter, Amber, was still young back then, and Kelly didn't trust me to handle her overnights. She said I was always choosing the store over the family. Maybe she was right. I worked security at a strip mall back then at a hotel, then at a grocery chain. Each time it was the same, me watching over shelves and doors while my own life went unguarded. By the time Target hired me in late 2013, I was 42 years old and running on autopilot. Nights blurred together, checking doors, sipping bad coffee, listening to radios crackle. I got used to talking to myself, humming to keep awake. Most guys quit night security within a year. I stayed. It was all I knew. That November night, I clocked in a little before 11 p.m. The air outside biting cold, carrying the kind of smell only LA gets in the fall. Half smog, half jacaranda. I swiped my badge, heard the familiar click of the lock, and walked through the automatic doors into the silent store. The bright red walls and clean aisles looked almost holy without customers. I liked it that way. The noise of the day melted, and it felt like I was the last man alive. Around 1:45 a.m., I was in the surveillance office, a cramped space with 3 monitors and a desk sticky from years of spilled soda. I'd been scrolling through old emails on my phone, trying not to think about how Kelly had texted earlier to remind me I'd missed Amber's school play. I told myself I'd make the next one, even though I knew I'd probably be stuck here again. That's when the first flicker hit. At first, it looked like nothing, just a camera glitch on aisle 17. That happens sometimes. Outdated wiring, cheap tech. But the thing was, only that one feed went bad, while the rest stayed crystal clear. Aisle 17, the toy section. I leaned forward, rubbing my eyes. The screen stuttered, static crawling across the image, and for a second I could have sworn a shadow stretched long across the floor. Too long, too tall, as if it belonged to someone who shouldn't fit there. My stomach turned. I grabbed the walkie. "Control, do you copy? We've got movement in 17. Only static answered. Then, under it, a whisper, soft, warped, and just clear enough to raise every hair on my arms. "Dad, don't look behind you." My heart stopped. That voice, it sounded like Amber. I twisted around in my chair. The hallway behind me was empty, just buzzing lights and beige paint. My pulse hammered in my ears. I told myself I was tired, that I was hearing things. But the whisper lingered in my mind like smoke. The footsteps started a minute later, slow, heavy, out in the hall. I stood up so fast the chair toppled behind me. "Hello?" My voice cracked. No answer. Just the sound of steps fading and then stopping, like whoever or whatever was out there was waiting for me to follow. And for reasons I can't explain, I did. I walked the empty corridors, my flashlight beam shaking more than I wanted to admit. The store felt off, colder than usual, air heavier. My boots squeaked against the polished tile. Every sound echoed too long, like the building was stretching itself around me. When I reached aisle 17, I froze. The toys were lined perfectly on the shelves except the ones at the very bottom. Every box, every doll, every truck had been pulled forward exactly the same distance, like careful little hands had been playing with them. I swallowed hard. "This is stupid," I muttered. "Kids break in sometimes. Probably a prank." But deep down, I knew better. The laughter started soft, a child's giggle, bouncing faintly off the shelves. It sounded so much like Amber when she was 6 that my knees nearly buckled. "Who's there?" My shout cracked through the silence. The giggle stopped. I turned to hit the emergency alarm, slapped the red panel. Nothing, just static screeching through the intercom like a busted radio. Panic clawed at my chest. I ran, but the hallways didn't feel right anymore. They stretched longer, turns looping back on themselves. My breaths grew ragged. Every corner I turned, I expected to see someone standing there. When I finally stumbled back into the surveillance office, I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it. My hands shook as I fumbled with the monitors. They weren't empty anymore. Figures darted between aisles too fast to focus on, their shapes blurring at the edges, shadows with no bodies, and every time I blinked, there were more of them, multiplying, rushing closer to the cameras. I ducked under the desk, clutching my badge like a crucifix. Sweat dripped down my temples. My chest heaved. I whispered to myself over and over, "You're fine, Mike. Just tired, just tired." But when I peeked up again, one of the monitors showed the surveillance office itself, and in the corner of the grainy image, crouched just behind me, was a figure. I spun around, swinging the flashlight like a weapon. The room was empty. My breath came in shallow gasps. The monitor still showed the figure hunched in the corner, but when I looked with my own eyes, nothing. I nearly bolted right then, but pride held me in place. I'd quit too many jobs before. My brother Steve had told me flat out, "You won't last 6 months at Target, you're too paranoid." I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. I sat back down, forcing myself to breathe. "It's just the cameras. They're old. They glitch." I said it out loud, trying to make it true. But the footsteps came back, this time right outside the door. "Hey!" I barked, louder than I meant. My voice cracked. "Who's out there?" The handle rattled once, then silence. I gripped the flashlight tighter, every muscle tight as a wire. My phone buzzed suddenly, nearly sending me through the ceiling. I snatched it up. No signal. The screen lit only long enough to show a text notification that made my blood run cold. From an unknown number. "Why did you leave me, Dad?" I dropped the phone like it burned. My chest seized. Amber's face flashed in my mind, the night she'd asked why I didn't come to her recital. The guilt gnawed at me sharper than fear ever could. I yelled just to drown it out. "Enough, I'm done with this." I stormed out of the office, stomping down the hallways, daring whatever was in there to show itself. The aisles twisted and shifted around me, but anger kept me moving. "You hear me? I'm not scared of you." But I was. God help me. I was. By 3:30 a.m., I was back in aisle 17, my legs trembling, sweat soaking my uniform. The toys were back in place, every shelf neat as though nothing had happened. But I knew better. I crouched on the floor, clutching the flashlight, shaking like a leaf in a storm. I thought about Kelly, about Amber, about how many times I'd chosen work over them. I thought about the empty house I'd crawl back to in the morning. For the first time in years, I felt truly hollow. The shadows flickered at the end of the aisle. Dozens of them, figures tall and narrow slipping in and out of the shelves. Whispers filled the air, overlapping, too many voices to catch except one that cut clear. "Stay with us." I shut my eyes, pressed my palms to my ears. No, I can't. I can't. When I opened them again, the aisle was empty. Dead quiet. The clock on my watch ticked steady, 3:59 a.m. At dawn, the building seemed to exhale. The lights steadied, the air warmed, the aisles returned to normal. It was as if nothing had happened. I left my badge and flashlight on the counter. I wasn't coming back. Not for Target, not for anyone. That evening, my sister called. "You quit again? What's the excuse this time, Mike?" I clenched my jaw. I couldn't tell her. Who would believe me? Instead, I said, it wasn't worth it. And for once, I meant more than just the job. That night, as I lay in bed, the house dark and silent, I tried to convince myself it was all stress and exhaustion, that maybe I'd had a breakdown. But then, just as I drifted toward sleep, I heard it. A child's giggle, faint but clear from the corner of my bedroom. And I knew aisle 17 wasn't finished with me. Some jobs demand more than they give, eating away at the hours and people who matter most. I spent years guarding empty stores while my family slipped through my fingers. Fear can take many shapes. Shadows in the aisle, whispers in the dark. But the greatest fear is realizing you traded real life for a hollow one. No paycheck is worth the cost of being absent from the people who need you most. I never thought much about trust until the night I lost it. For me, trust had always come easy. I trusted my professors to grade me fairly, my landlord to fix the heat before winter, my friends to show up when they said they would, and I trusted my co-workers because what else could you do when you were stuck behind a register 8 hours a day, side by side with the same people? You built a rhythm. You talked to survive the boredom. You let secrets slip, just to feel like you mattered to someone in the middle of endless transactions and beeping scanners. Back in 2017, when I first applied at the Target on Lincoln Avenue in Chicago, I wasn't thinking about trust at all. I was thinking about tuition. My mom couldn't cover more than rent, and my dad, well, his debts were his own storm cloud. That left me juggling community college classes in the morning and cashier shifts at night. The job was supposed to be temporary, just enough to keep the lights on while I finished school. But Target became its own kind of world. By the time I turned 23, I'd worked there long enough to know the rhythms of the place better than my own heartbeat. I knew which regulars showed up every Thursday evening for groceries, which kids tried to sneak candy under their coats, and which managers would actually help versus the ones who'd just stand around pretending to supervise. That's where Ryan came in. He was a year older than me, had been at the store longer, and made it all seem bearable. We joked about customers who argued over expired coupons. We folded uniforms together in the stockroom after closing, talking about music, movies, or life. I never had a brother, but Ryan felt close. He listened when I complained about my dad's gambling problems, when I worried about paying for textbooks, when I admitted I was scared of becoming stuck in retail forever. He never judged. He just nodded and cracked some dumb joke that made me laugh even when I didn't want to. For a long time, I believed Ryan was the safest part of my night shift life. But trust doesn't always break in one clean snap. Sometimes it frays little by little, so quietly you don't notice until the whole thing is gone. It started with small things. A set of car keys I swore I'd left in my locker turning up on the break room table. My locker itself left slightly open, though I always double-checked the lock. A slip of paper shoved between the pages of my notebook with the words, "Be careful what you say." I laughed it off at first. I even told my mom one night over dinner, pushing pasta around my plate. "It's probably just one of the guys joking around," I said. She frowned. "Honey, people don't joke like that. Watch yourself." I rolled my eyes because moms always worry, but in the back of my mind something itched. Then came March 8th, 2018, the night that trust became a weapon. That Thursday evening started like any other. Chicago was in its late winter mood, chilly winds rattling the glass doors as people shuffled in bundled coats. I clocked in at 4, put on the red polo I'd folded 100 times before, and braced myself for another shift. Ryan was already at register 5, flashing me a grin as I passed. "Ready for another thrilling night of cereal and coupons?" he teased. "Don't tempt me," I said, sliding into my own lane. Maybe I'll get a customer who argues with me about toothpaste prices again. It was the kind of harmless banter we always had. By the time the dinner rush hit, we were working side by side, trading jokes between scanning items. It felt normal. But around 9:30, as the store quieted, Ryan leaned closer than usual while we were restocking cereal boxes. His voice dropped low. "You really shouldn't have told me about your dad's problems," he said. "Some secrets can get dangerous if they slip." I froze. The box in my hand felt suddenly heavy. I hadn't told anyone else at work about Dad. Not a soul. "Ryan, stop, that's not funny," I snapped, stepping back. He only smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't laugh. I didn't even breathe. That single moment cracked something wide open inside me. By the time closing rolled around, my nerves were buzzing like live wires. I just wanted to grab my bag and get out. But when I opened my locker, a crumpled paper slipped to the floor. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "If you quit, you'll regret it." I felt my stomach twist. My first thought was to show Mr. Jacobs, the night manager. He was standing near the registers, sipping bad coffee and pretending to look busy. I shoved the note into his hand. "Someone's messing with me," I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted. "I don't think this is a joke anymore." Jacob scanned the paper for about 3 seconds before shrugging. "Emily, you're under stress. Finals, night shifts, it's just in your head." I wanted to scream at him. Instead, I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Back in the break room, Ryan was humming softly while folding a uniform. He glanced at me, still smiling. "You look pale. Everything okay?" I shoved my bag over my shoulder, not answering. My skin crawled. That night, trust felt like poison in my veins. The store emptied out fast after 10. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, echoing off shelves that suddenly felt taller, narrower. I stayed behind to sweep the back room, mostly because I wanted space to breathe. The air was thick, my chest tight. I told myself I was imagining things, that Ryan's smile was just a smile, that the notes weren't from him. The door slammed shut. I turned so fast the broom clattered to the floor. Ryan stood there, blocking the way out. His uniform shirt hung loose, his hair mussed from the long shift, and in his right hand he held a box cutter, casual like it was just another tool of the job. But his face was different. No grin, no warmth, just cold focus. "You don't get it, do you?" he hissed. "I know everything about you now. You shouldn't have trusted me." My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. "Ryan," I whispered, backing up against the shelves. "This isn't you. We're friends. Put that down, please." He stepped closer. The metal of the box cutter caught the fluorescent glare. Something in me snapped. I grabbed the nearest stack of plastic bins and hurled them. They crashed against his chest, sending him stumbling just enough for me to sprint past. Adrenaline drowned every thought. I shoved through the stockroom door, bolting down the hallway. My lungs burned, legs trembling. But I didn't stop. When I reached the front entrance, I pounded on the glass so hard my fists ached. The night supervisor, halfway through a crossword at customer service, looked up in shock. "Call the police," I screamed. My voice was raw, shaking, desperate. The police came fast, red and blue lights flashing across the parking lot. I stood near the entrance, wrapped in a manager's coat, shivering even though the heater blasted warm air. My voice trembled as I told the officers what happened, about the notes, the box cutter, Ryan's words. They searched the store, top to bottom. He was gone. What they found was his uniform shirt, discarded in the break room like he'd shed it and vanished into the night. For days after, I couldn't sleep. I jumped at every noise, every creak of a floorboard. I stayed at my sister's apartment, curled on her couch with the TV humming in the background, afraid of the silence. HR called me in eventually, promising to handle the situation internally. They spoke in careful corporate phrases: liability, confidentiality, procedure. I sat across from them, staring at their polished shoes, wondering if they even heard me. "Emily," one woman said, "you'll be safe here. We've increased security." Safe. The word felt like a cruel joke, because safe meant trust, and trust was gone. Weeks passed. The store went back to normal, at least on the surface. Customers smiled, registers beeped, managers barked about sales numbers. But I couldn't walk down an aisle without feeling eyes on me. Couldn't fold a uniform without hearing Ryan's voice. "You shouldn't have trusted me." At dinner one night, my sister tried to comfort me. She ladled soup into my bowl and said softly, "Not everyone is like him, Em. You'll learn to trust again." I stared at my untouched plate, My hands wouldn't stop trembling. "No," I whispered. "I won't. Not ever." The words tasted like ash, but they were true. Trust had once been easy. Now it was a locked door I wasn't sure I'd ever open again. And in that Target on Lincoln Avenue, every aisle carried shadows of betrayal that no light could chase away. Trust is fragile. It can take years to build and only seconds to break. When we place it carelessly, it can be twisted into a weapon. But when we guard it wisely, we protect not only ourselves, but also the people we love. Blind trust can cost safety, peace, even life. True strength lies in knowing when to trust and when to walk away. People always assume the night shift is quiet, maybe even peaceful. They imagine the aisles empty, the hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional squeak of a cartwheel. For me, that was the appeal. My apartment was chaos. My roommate blasting music until dawn, half-empty beer bottles crowding the counter, arguments about rent echoing through thin walls. But at work, at least I could count on order. Shelves lined up, boxes stacked neatly, the world under control. I'd been stocking at the Target on Pine Street in Seattle for about a year when things started to unravel. I was 29, drifting through jobs the way some people drift through relationships. My mom used to say I was reliable but restless. She wasn't wrong. I stuck to what I knew, unloading pallets, straightening shelves, avoiding confrontation. But sometimes, when the store was too still, I heard my name. Just a whisper, soft, low, pulling at me. The first time, I laughed it off. The second, I told myself it was just the hum of the freezers. The third, I admitted it to my mom on the phone. "Sometimes I hear voices in there," I told her. "Like someone calling my name." "I know it's stupid, Mom." She sighed, the way only mothers can. "David, you need rest. You're exhausted. Don't ignore it, though." I laughed, tried to make it sound like a joke, but unease settled in my chest. December was always busy, toys piled high, parents desperate for gifts, managers on edge. By the time December 19th rolled around, I'd been pulling doubles for weeks. My body was tired, my mind frayed. I told myself that's why I kept hearing things. I told myself fatigue was the culprit. But that night something happened that sleep couldn't explain away. It was 12:42 a.m. I was pushing a cart of toys toward aisle 10 when I heard it again. "David." Long, stretched out. A whisper that crawled down my spine. I froze. The aisle was empty. At the far end, mannequins stood dressed in Target uniforms as part of a holiday display. They'd been there all week, but something looked wrong. Their arms seemed bent differently than before, like they'd shifted when I wasn't looking. "Don't be stupid," I muttered. "You're tired. That's all." I turned back to the cart, trying to shake it off. That's when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the fire alarm shrieked. The sound ripped through me. Red strobes splashed across the shelves, bouncing off toy boxes and shiny packaging. My chest clenched. "Control! This is Mercer," I shouted into my walkie. "What's happening?" Static answered. Then a low growl, inhuman, guttural. I dropped the walkie, heart pounding, and sprinted for the front doors. They were locked. They weren't supposed to be locked. Emergency exits were protocol. But when I yanked at the handles, nothing budged. Overhead, the intercom boomed. "Attention guests, please evacuate immediately." My skin crawled. There were no guests. The store had been empty for hours. And then I saw him. At the far end of the aisle stood a figure in dark clothing, motionless. No features I could make out, no movement except the tilt of his head. "Who are you?" I yelled, my voice cracking. The figure vanished when the lights flickered again. I bolted into the home goods section, ducking behind a shelf stacked with towels. My chest heaved, my palms slick. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I yanked it out, desperate for something real. One unread message, from my sister sent hours earlier. "Don't stay late tonight, had a bad dream about you." My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I tried to reply, "I'm fine, don't worry," but the message failed to send. No signal. The fire alarm kept blaring, the red strobes pulsing like a heartbeat. I pressed my hands to my ears, rocking slightly. "This isn't happening," I whispered. "It's just stress." Just stress, but the store felt alive. The aisles stretched longer than they should, shadows pooling where no shadows belonged. Every creak of a shelf made me flinch. I crawled out from behind the towels, crouched low, and moved toward the stockroom. The walkie on my belt hissed again, words barely forming in the static. "David, stay." My throat tightened. I yanked the walkie off and hurled it across the aisle. It clattered against the tiles, sparks briefly flaring before it went silent. The fire alarm cut off suddenly. Silence flooded the store louder than the siren. And then in that silence, footsteps echoed behind me. Slow, deliberate. I ran. Not toward the exit this time. I'd already learned those doors wouldn't open. Instead, I bolted for the break room, my legs aching, lungs burning. I slammed the door behind me and shoved a chair under the handle, as if that flimsy barrier could protect me. I slid down the wall, trembling, staring at the clock. 2:30 a.m., an hour and a half until the manager usually showed up for early inventory. I just had to last that long. But the voices didn't stop. They seeped through the vents, through the cracks under the door. "David." I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't outside. It was inside me. At some point, exhaustion overtook fear. I must have dozed off on the cold tile floor because the next thing I remember is the door swinging open, light flooding in. Jesus, Mercer, what the hell happened? Mr. Logan, my manager, stood over me, keys in hand, eyes wide. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. Words wouldn't come, only a rasp. He helped me to my feet, shaking his head. "You look like hell. You need sleep, man. You can't keep doing doubles like this." I wanted to tell him about the figure, the voices, the alarm that lied about guests. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't form. For weeks after, I refused to enter the store alone. If I had to stock, I made sure another worker was within sight. My co-workers joked about me jumping at shadows, but I didn't care. At home, it wasn't better. The fire alarm in my building beeped during a test one afternoon, and I dropped my mug, shattering it across the floor. My roommate laughed. "You're scared of shadows, man. Grow up." I didn't argue. I just whispered. They weren't shadows. They knew my name. He shook his head, muttering about me losing it. Maybe he was right, but I knew what I saw. The Target on Pine Street never filed a report about alarms or malfunctions that night. According to them, nothing had happened. Business went on, customers shopped, shelves stayed stocked. But the silence in that store still remembers me. And sometimes when I walk past on my way to the bus, I swear I hear my name carried on the wind. Silence can hide truths louder than any noise. In the stillness of routine, it's easy to ignore the warnings, to blame exhaustion, to convince ourselves nothing's wrong. But when fear speaks, it demands we listen. Dismissing it may keep us comfortable, but it won't keep us safe. Always trust your instincts, even if no one else believes you. People talk about high school stress like it's just homework and grades, but that wasn't what made me want to escape that day. My stress didn't come from essays or history tests. It came from home. My parents had been circling divorce for months, and every day the fights got louder. That Tuesday morning, my dad slammed a door so hard the walls shook and yelled, "I can't live in this house anymore." My little brother cried, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was 16, old enough to understand everything and too young to stop any of it. When the shouting started, I left. I told my mom I needed school supplies, but really, I just needed air. Somewhere with clean white aisles and fluorescent lights, somewhere that didn't feel like my house splitting in half. Target had always been a weird kind of refuge. The order of it, the shelves stacked, the smell of popcorn from the snack bar, The background music gave me calm. It wasn't home, but it wasn't chaos either. That afternoon, I walked through the automatic doors of the Target on Lakeshore Boulevard like I was stepping into a sanctuary. The April breeze died as the cold store air wrapped around me. For a while it worked. I drifted through school supplies, letting my hands run over stacks of notebooks and colored pens. But the calm didn't last. I noticed him near electronics first. A tall man in a gray hoodie, standing too still, too quiet. Not shopping, not moving like the other customers, just staring at the shelves like he was waiting. I told myself not to overthink. Guys linger. People daydream. Don't be paranoid, I thought. But when I moved toward notebooks in aisle 9 and glanced back, he was there again. One aisle over, pretending to study DVDs. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. My stomach tightened. Still, I tried to laugh it off. "It's nothing," I muttered, gripping the notebook tighter. But deep down I knew it wasn't nothing. The more I walked, the more I felt it. The weight of his presence. I ducked into cosmetics, pretending to browse lip gloss I didn't care about. Through the corner of my eye, I saw him again. He had followed me. Each time I turned to look, he angled away like he was suddenly fascinated by nail polish or shampoo. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my ears. I grabbed a basket and tried to act normal, but every step felt heavier. I thought about leaving, but I didn't want to look like I was panicking. I didn't want him to know I'd noticed. Still, when I passed a red-vested worker named Clara near the registers, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Excuse me," I whispered. "There's this man. He's following me." Clara frowned, glanced around casually. "Don't worry, sweetie. We've got cameras. If he's still here, security will see him." Relief rushed through me for a second. Security meant safety. But when the guard checked the live feed, the man was gone. Just gone. "See?" Clara said gently. "He must have left." I nodded, forcing a smile, but dread gnawed at my stomach, because I knew he hadn't left. I picked up my basket and walked toward checkout. Then I saw him, standing near the greeting cards, blocking the main aisle. Hoodie pulled low, hands in pockets. He wasn't pretending anymore. He was just waiting. My throat went dry. My legs moved before my mind did. I dropped the basket, notebooks scattering, and ran. The sound of my sneakers on tile echoed across the store. Customers turned their heads as I bolted toward the sliding doors. Behind me, footsteps pounded faster, harder. I didn't dare look back. The doors whooshed open, and I burst into the parking lot, gulping air. The late afternoon sun burned against my skin, too bright after the fluorescent glow inside. Two bystanders near the carts turned at the sight of me, wide-eyed. "He's following me," I gasped. "Call someone." Their faces shifted from confusion to alarm as the man in the gray hoodie appeared at the doors. He froze when he saw people watching. Minutes later, police sirens pierced the air. Relief nearly buckled my knees. Officers questioned me, then approached him. He stood calmly near the carts, hood still up. "I was just browsing," he told them. His voice was steady, almost casual. The girl's imagining things. The officers exchanged looks. With no proof, no stolen items, no weapon, they couldn't hold him. They gave him a warning and let him walk away. I felt invisible, like my fear didn't matter because it couldn't be measured on paper. That night I sat at the kitchen table, still trembling. My mom touched my hand. "Honey, he can't hurt you now. You're safe at home." But I shook my head. My voice cracked as I whispered, "No, Mom. He saw me. He knows my face. What if he comes back?" Weeks passed, but the fear didn't. I stopped going anywhere alone. If my friends asked to hang out, I made excuses unless someone could pick me up. I avoided stores altogether. Even walking through my school's hallways, if a tall figure passed too close, my body stiffened. I never saw him again, but his shadow followed me everywhere. One afternoon, my best friend Lauren tried to convince me to go to the mall with her. "You can't hide forever, Sam," she said. You don't get it, I snapped. You didn't see his face under that hood. He wanted me to know he was watching. Lauren's smile faded. Then come with me. I won't let you be alone. It was kind of her, but it didn't change how I felt. The moment I stepped into a store, my eyes darted to every corner, every aisle. The calm I once found in those places was gone. The hardest part was the way adults treated it. Teachers, neighbors, even some of the officers spoke like it was just a misunderstanding, like maybe I'd exaggerated. But I knew what I felt. My body had screamed danger, and no one could take that away. Years later, the memory is still sharp. I'm older now, living on my own, and I shop only in broad daylight. I always park near the entrance. I keep my phone clutched in my hand. Sometimes people tease me for being paranoid, but paranoia keeps me breathing. I think about that afternoon often. The way his footsteps echoed, the way the police let him go. And I wonder if he ever thinks about me. If he remembers the girl who ran screaming from the Target parking lot. The Target on Lakeshore Boulevard still welcomes families every afternoon, bright and ordinary. But to me, those aisles aren't safe. They never will be. Because once fear finds you, it follows. Evil doesn't always hide in shadows. Sometimes it stands in plain sight, wearing ordinary clothes, blending into everyday places. The lesson isn't to live in fear, but to listen to it when it rises. Our instincts often see danger before our minds do. Trusting that instinct can mean the difference between escaping and becoming a story told by someone else. My name is Carlos Vega, and for almost 10 years my nights belonged to a Target store on Elmwood Avenue in Buffalo, New York. People don't think much about janitors. We're invisible, in the background, mopping the floors, emptying the trash, making sure the place looks spotless before morning. I liked it that way. Less people, less problems. While the rest of the world was home sleeping, I was pushing a mop down empty aisles. But for 3 months before that night in January 2012, something was wrong. It started small. A squeak of wheels when no carts were out, faint footsteps in aisles that I had already cleared. At first I blamed exhaustion. My wife, Maria, kept pressing me at dinner. Carlos, why do you look so pale after work? I'd shrug and mutter, it's nothing, just long hours. I didn't want to scare her. She already worried enough with bills and my aching knees. That bitter cold Thursday, January 12th, I unlocked the back entrance like I had thousands of times before. The wind cut through my jacket, and even inside the store the air felt wrong, unnaturally cold, sharp enough to see my breath. I paused in the doorway, keys clutched in my hand, and whispered, not tonight. Then I wheeled my mop bucket onto the gleaming tiles. By 12:20 a.m., I was near Home Decor when I heard it again, the squeak of wheels. My mop stopped mid-swipe. Out of aisle 14 rolled a shopping cart, slow and deliberate until it stopped dead in front of me. My chest tightened. Nobody else was there. The store had been empty for hours. I froze, staring at it. Every instinct in me wanted to run, but I forced a laugh, shaky and thin. Not tonight, I whispered again. Please, not tonight. I pushed the cart back into the aisle, hands trembling. But then came the voice. My name, whispered low, stretched out. Carlos. The mop clattered to the ground. I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. Who's there? I shouted. This isn't funny. Only silence answered. I tried to shake it off. I told myself someone could have snuck in. A teenager hiding after closing, maybe. Logic was a lifeline, so I grabbed onto it with both hands. I made my way to the break room and checked the security monitor. That's when my blood turned to ice. On the black and white screen, a shadow darted through the furniture section. It was fast, but it was there. Something darker than the aisles, cutting across the light. I ran, mop bucket forgotten, my sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. I rushed into furniture, ready to confront whoever it was, but all I found were mannequins dressed in winter coats. Rows of them, stiff and smiling, except one looked different. Its head was tilted toward me, glassy eyes reflecting the faint red glow of the exit sign. I stared, my throat dry. It hadn't been tilted like that earlier. I was sure of it. The silence pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. My pulse roared in my ears. I backed away, whispering, "You don't belong here. This is my shift, not yours." It sounded crazy, but talking made me feel less alone. Then I heard it again. My name, closer this time. "Carlos." I bolted. At 1:15 a.m., my body gave out. I slipped on a puddle of water I hadn't noticed, crashing to the floor. My hips screamed in pain. As I lay there, I heard it. Laughter. Not booming, not human. Light, cruel, echoing through the cavernous space. It wasn't coming from one place. It bounced from the walls, from the ceiling, from inside my head. "No," I gasped, pushing myself up. My knees shook, but I forced them to move. I abandoned the mop, abandoned the cart, and sprinted toward the staff office. Inside, I grabbed my phone. 5 bars of signal glowed on the screen. Relief swept through me, until I dialed Maria's number and it failed to connect. Again and again, the call dropped before it rang. I slammed the phone down and leaned against the wall, chest heaving. The laughter had stopped, but I felt watched. Every shadow in the break room stretched longer than it should have, bending toward me. Time dragged. I sat in the chair, gripping my rosary in my pocket, whispering prayers through dry lips. "Protect me, Lord. Don't let them take me." I don't remember when my eyes closed, only that when they opened, pale light leaked through the blinds. When my supervisor arrived at dawn, she found me slumped in the break room chair. My mop and bucket sat abandoned in the middle of the floor, water pooled around them. "What the hell happened, Carlos?" she asked, eyes wide. I shoved my keys into her hand, my voice raw. "I'm done. I won't clean this place alone again." She thought I was overreacting, maybe drunk or sick, but I wasn't either. I was broken. At home, Maria demanded answers. "What happened to you, Carlos? Why are you shaking?" I could barely look at her. My throat felt like it had gravel in it. "They know my name in there," I whispered. "Something's waiting for me." She tried to laugh, but it died on her lips when she saw my eyes. Hollow eyes. Eyes that had stared into something no man should. I never went back. I couldn't even drive past the Elmwood Avenue store without my chest tightening. Every time I'd take the long way home, adding 10 minutes to my commute. Safety was worth the time. Years have passed, but that night hasn't left me. I can't mop a floor without remembering the laughter. I can't hear a cart squeak without my hands trembling. My old coworkers still joke about me, the janitor who ran out in the middle of the night. They tell the new staff, "Don't worry, the only ghost in here is Carlos." But when those same workers clean alone, they whisper about the cold. About how sometimes the air feels like winter even in July. About how late at night they hear a voice. Not just any voice. My voice. Whispering my own name. Maybe I left something behind that night. Maybe the store kept it. All I know is that I survived by leaving, and I've never set foot in that Target again. Sometimes the scariest places aren't haunted houses or graveyards. They're the ordinary spaces we trust every day. Fear teaches us to listen. If something feels wrong, it usually is. Don't ignore the warnings. Don't dismiss the chill in your gut. Protect yourself, even if others laugh. Because what follows you in silence may know your name, and not every voice deserves an answer. My name is Marissa Hale, and for most of my adult life I've hated Christmas shopping. When people imagine the holidays, they see twinkling lights, peppermint cocoa, and kids laughing under a decorated tree. I see long lines, traffic, and the way money disappears faster than snow melting in the rain. I used to get away with ordering everything online at the last second, letting boxes pile up at the front door while I told myself, the kids don't care how the presents arrive. But that year, 2019, my older brother gave me a lecture. He called me early one morning, his voice full of that older sibling judgment I've heard my whole life. "Marissa, you can't just order everything online again. Ethan and Clara should feel the Christmas magic. not just tear into Amazon boxes. Get out there, take them shopping, let them see the lights. I rolled my eyes, phone wedged between my shoulder and cheek while I packed Ethan's lunch. Do you want to deal with the tantrums in public? Because Clara doesn't do well in stores, and Ethan never stops asking questions. He chuckled. That's called parenting. Quit hiding behind Prime Delivery. I wanted to hang up, but guilt is a powerful thing. So that afternoon I bundled the kids into the SUV, cranked up the heat, and drove to the Target on 122nd Avenue. Portland was gray and damp, Christmas lights drooping under the drizzle. Ethan, 7 years old and endlessly curious, peppered me with questions about reindeer. Clara, 5, whined that her mittens were itchy. By the time I pulled into the crowded lot, I was already exhausted. Inside, the store buzzed with chaos. Carts bumped, carols played over the intercom, and families argued over wrapping paper. I told myself it would be quick. A board game, art supplies, paper, maybe one toy each. Then home, cocoa, bedtime. But nothing ever goes as planned. At first, everything seemed normal. I grabbed Monopoly, some markers, and rolls of paper. The kids darted between shelves, Clara trying to climb into the cart while Ethan quizzed me about Santa's sleigh capacity. I smiled through clenched teeth, keeping my patience by a thread. Then I noticed him. In the toy aisle, among the chaos, a man stood still. Tall, in a faded navy jacket, hands stuffed in his pockets. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending. Just standing near the shelves, eyes roaming. I shook it off. People get weird during the holidays. 10 minutes later, I spotted him again in the book section. Same stance, same jacket. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to focus on the shelves. In home goods, I saw him a third time. Always close enough to notice, never close enough to confront. Ethan tugged at my sleeve, his voice low. Mom, why does that guy keep following us? I forced a smile. He's not, sweetie. Just keep walking. But my palms were already sweating. Clara started to cry, her little voice echoing off the aisles. I crouched to calm her, whispering, It's okay, baby, almost done. When I glanced at the reflection in the photo frame glass, I froze. He wasn't pretending anymore. His eyes were locked on Ethan and Clara. Panic surged through me. I stood quickly, yanking the cart forward. My legs felt like stone, but my hands gripped the cart like it was a shield. I spotted the glowing exit sign up ahead, just a few more feet. Then the path was blocked. A giant pallet stacked with unopened boxes, 2 employees leaning against it sipping sodas. Could you move this, please? My voice cracked, sharper than I meant. They blinked at me, confused, before slowly pushing the pallet aside. I tried to breathe, but Ethan whispered, He's closer now. He's right there. I didn't dare look back. I shoved the cart faster, pulling both kids by the hands. Every step felt like I was dragging them through water. The automatic doors slid open with their slow, mocking hum. Cold air hit my face like a slap. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my keys. The SUV beeped, unlocking, and I hustled the kids inside, buckling Clara with trembling fingers. When I finally turned to look, the man stood just inside the glass doors. He wasn't moving. He wasn't following. Just standing there, smiling faintly. That invisible line between safety and danger, the door frame, was the only thing holding him back. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the townhouse made me jump. I checked the locks 3 times, then pulled Ethan and Clara into my bed just to hear them breathe. When I told my brother the next morning, he tried to calm me. You're overthinking it. Creeps hang around stores all the time during the holidays. He probably wasn't even looking at you. I wanted to believe him, but Ethan's words wouldn't leave me. He's right there. Clara wouldn't stop asking questions either. Why was that man staring? Was he going to take us? Her voice cracked on the last word. I held her tight, lying through my teeth. No, sweetie. You're safe. But inside I wasn't sure. For weeks after, I avoided that target, I drove farther just to buy groceries. When I had to take the kids shopping, I watched every aisle, every stranger. I never let go of their hands. Even when the store felt normal again, the memory stayed. Christmas morning came and went. Paper shredded across the living room floor, kids laughing as they played with new toys. On the surface, life was fine, but I knew something had changed. Every shopping trip since then, I've carried that shadow with me. A man in a navy jacket, always a few steps behind. Maybe he was just a creep. Maybe he was something worse. I'll never know because he never crossed the line. But that doesn't matter. What matters is how close he came. When I take Ethan and Clara out now, I grip their hands tighter. I scan every aisle, every corner. Strangers linger too long and I feel my chest tighten. People laugh when I tell them. "You're paranoid," they say. "That's just mom anxiety." Maybe they're right. But when you see a man's eyes lock onto your children, paranoia feels like survival. Because sometimes danger doesn't chase you into the dark. Sometimes it waits under the brightest lights, where nobody expects it. We live in a world where danger doesn't always wear a mask or hide in the shadows. Sometimes it stands in plain sight, smiling faintly, hoping you'll dismiss the warning in your gut. But instinct is a gift, especially when others depend on you. Listen to it. Protect what matters. And never apologize for walking away from something that feels wrong. My name is Damian Lowe, and for most of my life I've been the kind of guy who avoids chaos. I work in IT, I come home, I help my kids with homework, I watch the late news, and then I go to bed. My wife Holly teases me for being predictable. She'll say, "Damian, if someone asked me to write your schedule, I could do it by the minute." She's right. I've always believed routine meant safety. But on October 14th, 2016, my routine cracked. That Friday had been long. We'd had a server crash at work, and I spent most of the afternoon trying to fix it while my phone buzzed with messages from Holly. She'd been telling me for days to pick up new headphones because the kids kept losing hers. I'd promised, then forgotten, and she'd finally had enough. Her last message read, "Please just grab them tonight. I need them for work tomorrow. Don't come home without them." I sighed when I saw it, rubbing my temples. The thought of dealing with traffic and crowds after 9 hours of troubleshooting made me want to collapse. But I loved her, and the truth was, it was a small thing to ask. So I drove to the Target near Kenwood Mall. I told myself it would be quick, in, out, and back to my couch within 20 minutes. The store was buzzing when I walked in. Friday evening, paychecks cashed, people stocking up for the weekend. Kids ran ahead of carts, couples argued in front of shelves, cashiers called for backup lanes. The noise was ordinary, comforting even. I grabbed a red basket and headed straight to electronics, weaving past the Halloween aisle full of plastic skeletons and oversized candy bags. I didn't know then how quickly ordinary could collapse into terror. I was scanning headphone boxes, debating whether to spend the extra $20 for a better pair, when the atmosphere changed. At first it was subtle, like a hush passing through the store. Then came the shouting. I peeked around the corner and froze. 2 men in ski masks stormed the registers. One had a pistol in his hand, waving it wildly. The other shoved handfuls of cash into a duffel bag, drawers slamming open and shut. At first my brain tried to make sense of it. Some stunt, maybe a prank. But then the gunman slammed the weapon against the counter so hard the crack echoed through the store. Employees ducked, customers screamed, and the truth hit me like ice water. This was real. My chest clenched. I felt my phone heavy in my pocket, but pulling it out seemed impossible. One wrong move and I'd be noticed. And then it happened. The gunman turned, our eyes locked. Time slowed. His gaze was sharp, feral. For a moment I felt pinned in place like prey caught in the open. Then his voice cut through the chaos. "You! Move and you're dead!" Instinct took over. I dropped flat to the floor and crawled behind a row of gaming displays, heart hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. My hands shook so badly I nearly knocked over a stack of consoles. A woman crouched nearby whispered, her voice cracking, "Don't move, don't breathe." I nodded, throat dry, forcing myself to stay low. The robbery lasted only minutes, but it felt like an eternity. The gunman barked threats while the other stuffed money into the bag. Every sound felt amplified. The zip of the duffel, the slam of drawers, the muffled sobs of cashiers crouched behind counters. I pressed my cheek against the cool tile, wishing I could disappear into it. Every second I expected to hear footsteps charging toward me, to feel a hand dragging me out by the collar. At one point, one of the men stormed toward the electronics section. I held my breath as he passed. He was so close I could smell him, sweat, leather, and the metallic tang of gunpowder. My muscles locked until he moved on. Then came the sirens. Faint at first, then growing louder, closer. A spark of hope lit in my chest. The thieves cursed, panicked. The gunman shouted something to his partner, and just like that, they bolted. I stayed frozen until the sound of their footsteps faded. Only then did I dare move, sitting up slowly, my arms trembling. My shirt was damp with sweat. My breath came in shallow bursts, and I felt like I'd aged 10 years in those 10 minutes. When the police stormed the building, I barely felt relief, just numbness. Officers rushed past me, weapons drawn, voices barking orders. Customers staggered out from hiding spots, crying, hugging strangers. One officer touched my shoulder. "You all right, sir?" I nodded automatically, but my voice betrayed me when I whispered, "I thought he was going to shoot me." They guided us outside, where red and blue lights painted the parking lot. Reporters were already gathering, their cameras pointed at us like vultures. I avoided their questions, leaning against my car, hands still shaking too hard to hold the keys. When I finally got home, Holly threw her arms around me, clinging so tightly I could barely breathe. "Damien, what if you hadn't come back? What if—" Her voice cracked before she could finish. Our kids, overhearing, rushed to me. Ethan wrapped his arms around my waist. Lily clung to my leg. They didn't fully understand, but they felt the fear radiating from me. I kissed their heads and whispered, "It's okay, I'm home." But inside, I wasn't sure it was okay. Weeks passed, but the fear didn't fade. Every time I stepped into a store, my chest tightened. Every cashier drawer that slammed made me flinch. Even the squeak of carts made my shoulders tense. The police caught the men eventually. I was called to testify. Sitting in the courtroom, facing those ski masks now replaced with tired faces, I trembled as I relived the night. The prosecutor asked me to describe what I saw. My throat tightened, my palms slick with sweat. When I finished, I felt both relief and shame. Relief that it was over, shame that I'd been so helpless. The verdict brought closure on paper, but not in my mind. Safety, I learned, isn't something you can count on. It's fragile, breakable in an instant. One moment you're shopping for headphones, the next you're crawling on the floor praying not to be noticed. That night still lingers. I still wake sometimes with the gunman's voice in my head. Move and you're dead. And every time I walk into a store, I scan the doors, the aisles, the exits, because now I know. Ordinary can shatter in seconds. Safety is never guaranteed, not even under bright lights and holiday sales. Evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it walks in through the front doors, bold and loud, turning ordinary moments into nightmares. The lesson I carry is this: never take peace for granted, and never assume you're untouchable. Awareness may not stop danger, but it might be the only shield you have when safety collapses. My name is Caleb Monroe, and most people who meet me these days only see the surface. A 28-year-old guy back from deployment trying to get by. They don't see the constant noise in my head, the way every sudden movement puts me on edge, or how I sometimes wake up convinced I'm still over there. When I came home from Afghanistan, everyone said the same thing. "You're safe now. You can relax." I wanted to believe them, but I couldn't. Safe wasn't a word that meant much anymore. I'd seen safe places turn into kill zones in seconds. I'd seen laughter turn into screams. Coming back to Houston was supposed to fix me, but instead I found myself pacing the apartment at night, staring at the locks, eating nothing but takeout and protein bars because grocery stores made me feel like I was being boxed in. My sister Rachel worried. She's 3 years younger, but you'd think she was the older one the way she hounds me. That afternoon she called and said, "Caleb, I'm begging you. Go to Target. Stock the fridge. You can't keep living like a ghost." I tried brushing her off, but she got sharp in that way only she can. "Either you go tonight or I'm coming over tomorrow and dragging you out myself." I sighed, grabbed my keys, and gave in. It was a damp March evening in 2021, the kind where the rain never really falls but hangs in the air like mist. The glow of the Target on Westheimer Road lit up the wet pavement like a lighthouse. I sat in my truck for a long minute, hands on the wheel, convincing myself it was just shopping. Nothing more, no threats, no enemy, just people buying cereal. Finally, I pushed through the sliding doors, that wave of warm air hitting me, and grabbed a cart. The store was busy, families with kids tugging on sleeves, college kids loading up on frozen meals, a couple arguing in the detergent aisle. Normal stuff. But for me, normal never stayed normal. I tried to focus on the list Rachel had texted me. Bread, milk, eggs, fruit. Something green that wasn't a protein bar. But old habits die hard. My eyes swept the store automatically, cataloging exits, noting who lingered too long near the registers, who stood still when everyone else moved. That's when I noticed him. A guy leaning against the seasonal aisle display, hands shoved in his hoodie pocket, eyes flicking toward the front doors more than the shelves. Another one stood by the registers without a cart, just watching. They weren't shopping. I knew that stance. They were waiting. I shook it off. Civilians notice nothing. Veterans see too much. That's what I told myself. Still, my hand twitched like it wanted to reach for a rifle that wasn't there. As I debated over which loaf of bread to buy, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I spun so fast the guy behind me jumped back. My heart thudded when I saw who it was. Jared Klein, an old acquaintance from back home, now an off-duty cop. "Easy, Caleb," he said, holding his hands up. "Didn't mean to startle you." I forced a breath out. "You shouldn't sneak up on people like that." He gave me a half smile, but his eyes were serious. "Word is, there's been chatter about theft rings hitting stores in this area. Groups of guys, smash and grab style. Veterans like you? They figure you're distracted, adjusting. Easy marks." Before I could reply, the sound cut through the air, shouting at the front of the store. My stomach dropped. The scene unraveled fast. 2 men in masks stormed the registers. One shoved a customer to the ground and ripped a purse from her shoulder. The other grabbed a cart stacked with electronics and rammed it through a display, boxes flying. People screamed and scattered. Employees ducked behind counters. The store's upbeat pop music kept playing, absurd against the chaos. Without thinking, I shoved my cart aside and moved. One thief barreled down the aisle, nearly colliding with me. His eyes widened and he snarled, "Move or I'll..." He didn't finish. My body acted before my brain. I dropped low, swept his legs and sent him crashing into a shelf. Boxes of blenders and coffee makers toppled onto him as he cursed and tried to crawl free. Shoppers gasped. Some ran past me, others froze, unsure whether to help or hide. I heard a mother shout, "Somebody stop them, please." Her toddler wailed in her arms. The second thief bolted down another aisle, shoving people aside. Instinct surged. I gave chase, boots pounding against the linoleum. He grabbed a toaster off a shelf and hurled it at me. I dodged just in time, the appliance smashing against the floor. The noise was sharp, metallic, too close to the sound of gunfire. My body reacted, adrenaline roaring through me. For a second, I wasn't in Houston anymore. I was back in the desert, sprinting after shadows, heart slamming against my ribs. By the time I rounded the corner, red and blue lights flashed outside. Sirens wailed. Officers stormed the entrance with weapons drawn, shouting commands. The thief skidded to a halt, dropping the bag of electronics. Both men were on the ground within minutes, hands cuffed, curses muffled under the pressure of knees in their backs. I stood there, chest heaving, sweat soaking through my shirt. Shoppers slowly emerged from hiding, some crying, some clapping shakily. An officer approached me, his expression caught between respect and reprimand. "You okay?" he asked. I forced a smile, though my hands shook violently. "I've been through worse." "You could have been killed," he muttered. Rachel called later that night. She'd heard through a friend what had happened, and when I didn't pick up, she drove straight over. She found me sitting in the dark. No TV, no lights, just me staring at nothing. "Caleb," she whispered, kneeling beside me. "You're home now. It's over." But it didn't feel over. My body was home, but my head was still chasing shadows through a battlefield disguised as a department store. The days that followed blurred together. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the masked man barreling toward me, heard the crash of that toaster, felt the phantom weight of a rifle in my hands. Rachel tried to help. She stocked my fridge herself, made me sit with her for dinner, forced me to talk. I wanted to tell her it was just a store robbery, nothing compared to the things I'd seen overseas. But the truth was, it rattled me because it proved what I feared most. The war might have ended for me on paper, but danger still walked in civilian shoes. Target was supposed to be safe, ordinary. Yet under those harsh white lights, between shelves of cereal and cleaning supplies, I'd been reminded that violence doesn't only live in deserts or mountains. It waits in places you least expect, and it strikes when you're just trying to live a normal life. I survived that night, but survival isn't the same as peace. And peace, I've learned, is harder to hold on to than any weapon I ever carried. Some battles follow you home. Danger doesn't always hide in faraway war zones. It can appear in the middle of ordinary life, when you're pushing a cart down a grocery aisle. The lesson I carry is this: you can't always control where or when chaos arrives, but you can choose how you face it. And sometimes, the hardest fight is not against the world outside, but against the fear that refuses to let you rest. When I think back on that night, the first thing I remember isn't the shadow or the doors or even the panic that made my chest feel like it was collapsing in on itself. What I remember is the quiet. Not peaceful quiet, like when you're out fishing with your dad and all you can hear is the ripple of water against the boat. No, this was heavy quiet. The kind that made the hair on the back of my neck prickle. The kind that seemed to press down on your ears until you swore you could hear your own heartbeat louder than anything else. I had been working nights at the Target in Flagstaff for about 2 months at that point. It wasn't what I wanted for myself. Hell, it wasn't even what I thought I'd be doing a year earlier. I was supposed to be finishing school. I was supposed to be working towards something. At least that's what my dad liked to remind me every time we spoke. "College isn't optional, Julian," he'd bark. "You think you're gonna skate by on minimum wage forever? Hold down a job at least, or don't bother coming home." That was why I ended up here. Not because I wanted to, but because it was either stocking shelves in the middle of the night or dealing with my dad's disappointment face to face. And the truth? I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Most nights at Target followed the same rhythm. We clocked in at 10, grabbed box cutters from the supply room, and split off to whatever sections needed filling. I usually got assigned to housewares or dry groceries. I'd slice open cardboard, scan the barcodes, set items on the shelves. Then I'd break down the boxes and stack them onto pallets. It was mindless work, and most of the time that was fine with me. The overnight crew was small, just me, Tom, and an older lady named Rhonda, who mostly stayed near the back with the clothing shipments. Tom was in his 40s, a dad of 3 who was always talking about how he was saving up for his daughter's braces. Nice guy, kept to himself. He liked blasting country music in the back room, which I could sometimes hear faintly through the walls. That night, November 3rd, the air outside was sharp with cold. You could smell pine if the wind shifted just right. Inside, the store felt emptier than usual. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing in and out like lazy fireflies. I had just finished stacking rows of detergent when I noticed it. A shadow stretched across the polished linoleum, long and thin, cutting across the end of the aisle. My first thought was Tom. "Tom, you still in the back?" I called, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah," he shouted back faintly, loading pallets, which meant I was alone out there. I stepped toward the end of the aisle, my sneakers squeaking against the floor. Nothing, just neat rows of cleaning supplies and the low hum of the refrigerators from across the store. No movement, no footsteps. Still, my chest tightened like I'd sprinted a mile. I shook my head. "You're tired, man. Just seeing things," I muttered. But that quiet, that heavy, pressing quiet, didn't lift. I tried to keep working. Sliced open another box, set rows of fabric softener onto the shelf, taped up the cardboard. But every few seconds I caught myself glancing toward the end of the aisle, waiting to see the shadow again. That's when the intercom crackled to life. Normally it was used during the day for announcements. "Clean up in aisle 12, or guest service needed at the front." At night it stayed silent. But now it hissed with static, sharp and sudden, making me flinch so hard I nearly dropped my box cutter. I stared up at the ceiling speaker. The sound wasn't just static, it had rhythm. It almost sounded like breathing, labored low, like someone was right there above me, exhaling into the system. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it cut off. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump again. I pulled it out, grateful for something normal to focus on. But the screen was black. Dead. That didn't make sense. I had charged it fully before coming in. "Don't be stupid," I whispered. "It's just the power acting up." I shoved the phone back into my pocket and started toward the front of the store. If I could just see Tom, maybe even Rhonda, maybe my nerves would settle. But halfway there I froze. The shadow was back. Longer this time. It stretched across the floor from one aisle to the next, impossibly elongated, as though whoever, or whatever it belonged to, was too tall to be standing inside the building. My throat went dry. I clutched the box cutter like a weapon, the tiny blade feeling pathetically small in my sweaty palm. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. It echoed uselessly through the empty store. The only response was the faint squeak of a cartwheel in the distance. That was enough for me. My fight instinct collapsed under the weight of my fear, and I bolted for the front. The sliding doors didn't open. I hit them hard with my shoulder, expecting the sensors to trigger. Nothing. I pressed both palms against the glass, pushed until my muscles trembled. Still nothing. It was like the sensors were dead, like the store had swallowed me whole. Behind me, I heard it. Not footsteps. Not even the sound of shoes dragging. It was heavier than that, stranger. Like something pulling itself along the floor with too many limbs, scraping against the linoleum. The shadow moved closer, stretching unnaturally, crawling across the tiles. My chest seized. "Come on," I begged the doors. "Please, please." I slammed my fists against the glass. My heart thundered so loud it drowned out everything else. And then, with a mechanical shriek, the doors slid apart. Cold November air rushed in and I stumbled outside, nearly falling to my knees. I gasped, pulling in lungfuls of sharp, pine-scented air. For a moment I thought I'd made it, that the nightmare was behind me. But when I turned back, I saw it. The shadow stood just inside the glass, pressed against it like a stain testing the barrier between us. No shape, no face, just blackness pooled into something that suggested form. Then, without warning, it melted into the dark, dissolving into nothing. I stood there shaking, my breath clouding in the freezing air. I didn't go back inside until the shift ended. And even then, I didn't breathe easy. The next morning, I tried explaining it to my manager. He was a round man with thinning hair who liked to joke too much for his own good. "You've been watching too many horror movies, kid," he chuckled, slapping me on the shoulder. "I'm serious," I said. "The intercom, the shadow, look, just check the cameras." That made him pause. He grumbled, but eventually pulled me into the security office. Together, we scrolled through the feeds. 15 minutes of footage, gone. Just static. Exactly the stretch of time I had been alone near the registers. His face tightened, but he forced another laugh. Glitch. Happens all the time. I wanted to argue, to scream that it wasn't just a glitch, that something had been there with me. But I could see in his eyes that even if he believed me, he didn't want to. Believing would mean acknowledging something he couldn't explain. And people don't like that. So I shut my mouth. I quit a week later. When I told my friends about it, they laughed, called me paranoid, said I was just tired from the night shifts, that I probably hallucinated the whole thing. But sometimes, late at night, when I drove past the Target on West Route 66, I slowed down just enough to glance at the front doors. And sometimes I swear I saw it. A smear of black pressed against the glass, waiting. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't. But I knew one thing for certain. I was never going back to a night shift again. Some dangers in life are real. Others are shadows of our own fears. But whether or not the threat can be explained, listening to your instincts matters. Ignoring fear can get you hurt. But respecting it even when others laugh can keep you safe. I was never the kind of mother who thought she'd end up on the wrong side of her own daughter's trust. For most of Maya's childhood, I was the fun mom. The one who stayed up late making pancakes shaped like animals. The one who let her pick nail polish colors at Walgreens even when we were broke. The one who drove across town for a particular brand of glitter gel pens because she said the other ones didn't feel right. But teenagers change. And somewhere between 13 and 15, the bridge between us snapped. By the summer of 2018, the house was more like a battleground than a home. Arguments weren't once in a while, they were daily. I'd come home from double shifts at the clinic, exhausted, and find her scrolling on her phone with dirty dishes still piled in the sink. One night I lost my temper. "Do you ever think of anyone but yourself, Maya?" I snapped, slamming the dishwasher shut. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Do you ever spend time with me, Mom? You're always working." It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them. Flat, angry, but with something wounded buried underneath. I could feel it land deep inside me, guilt mixing with the exhaustion. I told myself she didn't understand, that she couldn't know what it felt like to hold a household together alone since her father left, to make sure the mortgage got paid, to keep food on the table. Still, her words echoed until they were louder than anything else. 2 nights later, I tried to make it right. I promised her we'd spend Saturday together. "Fun day out," I called it, forcing cheer into my voice. We'd shop, grab iced coffee, maybe laugh for the first time in weeks. Savannah in July was sweltering, sticky air that clung to your skin. So the Target on Abercorn Street felt like a good place to start. Cool air conditioning, big aisles, and enough distractions to keep us from fighting. When we pulled into the crowded parking lot, Maya barely looked up from her phone. I swallowed the sting of that and told myself it didn't matter. All that mattered was trying. The store was packed with tourists hiding from the heat, families weaving through carts, kids begging for toys. I told myself this was normal, safe, nothing to worry about. But I've learned that the most ordinary moments are the ones where danger hides best. We started in the women's section. I tried holding up a sundress, something light and pretty. "Maya, would you at least look at this?" She rolled her eyes without lifting her phone. "No one wears that, Mom." I could feel the tension crawling back, the old fight just waiting to break out again. But before I could bite back with some sharp reply, something tugged at my attention. A man. Mid-50s maybe, in a baseball cap pulled low, pushing an empty cart. At first I didn't think much of it. Plenty of people walked the same aisles. But then I saw him again near the fitting rooms, then again by cosmetics. Always close. Always too close. A ripple of unease passed through me. I whispered, "Maya, stay close to me." She barely glanced up. "Mom, you're paranoid." But I wasn't. I felt it in my gut, The way mothers feel things. The way we know when something is wrong even if we can't explain how. I tried testing it. I turned down an aisle I didn't need. Pet supplies. We didn't even own a dog. A minute later, there he was, drifting past the end of the aisle, pretending to look at cat litter. My palms grew damp. My heart began to race, though I forced my face to stay calm. If I scared Maya, she'd only fight me harder. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. When we passed by housewares, I leaned down and whispered sharply, "We're leaving. Now." Maya jerked back annoyed. "What? Why?" "Just trust me," I said, my voice tight. We walked toward the exit. My chest pounded with each step. And then I felt it. The man's presence right behind us. Close enough I swore I could hear the wheels of his empty cart rolling across the floor. The automatic doors slid open, and for a split second I thought we'd made it. But when I glanced back, he was there, just behind us. Close enough to follow us into the parking lot. Close enough to make sure we were alone. Every instinct screamed at me to change course. If we went straight to the car, I knew he'd come too. I didn't have time to think it through. I just acted. I pulled Maya's arm and veered sharply toward the Starbucks counter inside the store. "Sit," I told her. "Don't move." She frowned. "Mom, what are you—" "Just sit," I snapped, louder than I meant to. Heads turned. The barista behind the counter froze mid-pour. I raised my voice on purpose now. "Excuse me, can someone call security?" The barista blinked, confused, but nodded slowly. The man stopped in his tracks. He didn't run. He didn't protest. He just casually steered his empty cart toward the registers, as though nothing had happened. But as he walked away, he looked back at me. Not startled, not angry. Calm, almost mocking, like he knew something I didn't. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the iced coffee the barista offered me minutes later. Security arrived, 2 young men who looked barely older than Maya. They checked the area, but by then the man had vanished into the crowd. One of them shrugged. "Ma'am, it's a busy weekend. People get nervous when stores are packed. He probably wasn't doing anything." I nodded because I didn't have the strength to argue. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. That night, I locked every window. I double-checked every door. Maya, usually the one glued to her phone, stayed strangely quiet as we drove home. She finally whispered, "Mom, he really was following us, wasn't he?" I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "I don't know, baby. Maybe." But I did know. I could still see the way he looked at her, the way he looked at me when he realized I'd caught on. Maya went to bed early. I stayed awake, sitting on the couch with the TV off, staring at the faint glow of the driveway through the blinds. Twice I thought I saw the outline of a baseball cap in the shadows. When I stepped outside to check, there was nothing. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold. My hands trembled each time a car passed the house. I thought about what the security guard said, about paranoia and nerves. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just tired, overworked, oversensitive. But then I remembered how the man moved through those aisles, how he appeared each time I turned a corner, how he vanished the moment attention landed on him. That wasn't nerves. That was intention. Days passed, but the unease stayed. Every time I drove down Abercorn Street, my eyes flicked to the Target parking lot. Every time I walked Maya to school, I scanned the street for a baseball cap. Maya stopped arguing with me after that. Maybe she realized I wasn't being paranoid. Maybe she finally saw the world through my eyes, how fragile safety really is. But I hated that it took fear to bring us back together. A week later, I found myself standing by the window again at night, staring into the driveway. Nothing moved, but my gut whispered the same truth it had in that store. Some people don't follow to rob or to steal. Some people follow because they're waiting for when no one's watching. I didn't tell Maya that. I just held her a little closer the next time she left the house and prayed she'd never see that calm, mocking look again. We spend our lives teaching our children to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to not judge too quickly. But sometimes safety means trusting instincts over courtesy. The night it all began, I told myself it was just another late stop, just another lie I'd smooth over when I got home. I've lived my life that way, cutting corners, telling small lies to avoid bigger confrontations. It wasn't something I planned. It just happened like a bad habit that turned into a routine. Leah hated it. She called me out every chance she got. "Ollie, you always have an excuse. You're either late or you forget or you think it won't matter." She was right, and I knew it. Still, I kept doing it. That Wednesday, February 12th, I'd left work with every intention of driving straight home. Leah had texted me at 6:45 sharp. "Don't be late again, Ollie. I'm tired of eating alone." I read it, sighed, slipped the phone back into my pocket and told myself a quick stop wouldn't make a difference. My nephew's birthday was coming up and I hadn't bought him a gift. What was 10 minutes? I should have gone home. God, I should have gone home. By the time I pulled into the Target lot on Rainier Avenue, the rain was coming down sideways. Sheets of water lashed against my windshield, the wipers barely keeping up. I jogged inside with my jacket pulled over my head, shaking off the storm the second I hit the fluorescent light of the entrance. The store felt hollow. That was the first thing I noticed. Usually there's a low buzz, music from the speakers, people talking, carts squeaking on tile. But that night, the place felt emptied out. Only a handful of employees shuffled in the distance. I pushed a cart anyway, trying to shake off the weirdness. I told myself I'd grab a toy, maybe some wrapping paper, and get back home before Leah had finished setting the table. I repeated it like a mantra. "Just 10 minutes, Ollie. You'll make it back before she even knows." I wish that's how it had gone. The toy aisle was deserted, shelves half-stocked like the storm had scared off the delivery trucks. I walked slowly, scanning for something a 9-year-old boy might like, when I noticed a splash of red on the floor. It was a jacket, a kid's jacket crumpled in the middle of the aisle like someone had dropped it seconds before. The fabric was wet, rain still dripping off the sleeves. "Hello?" I called out, though my voice came out softer than I meant. Nobody answered. I picked up the jacket, half expecting a frantic parent to round the corner. But no one came. The aisle stretched out in both directions, silent, empty. I draped it over my cart and tried to shake the unease prickling the back of my neck. That's when I noticed the silence. The music, gone. Not just turned down, but cut out completely. The hum of the overhead lights buzzed faintly, but the background noise of a store was gone, like someone had sucked the air out of the place. I reached for my phone, but the screen showed no service. Not low bars, not a weak signal, nothing. Dead. Weird, I muttered. As I turned toward Home Goods, I froze. A child's voice drifted down the aisle, thin, high-pitched. "Mommy?" The hair on my arm stood straight up. The sound wasn't right. It wasn't a clear voice, more like a recording played through a broken speaker. Still, my chest tightened. "Hello?" I called again, forcing my voice louder. "Anybody here?" No answer, just the steady drip of rain against the glass windows. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate. They echoed against the linoleum, getting closer. I spun around, heart hammering. The aisle was empty. The footsteps stopped. That's when I realized I was holding my breath. I pushed the cart faster now, trying to find the registers. The layout of the store felt strange, stretched somehow. Aisles looked longer than I remembered. The overhead lights flickered, shadows creeping at the edges. Then I saw it again. The red jacket. Only this time it wasn't in my cart. It was at the far end of the cleaning aisle, standing upright, sleeves arranged like arms stretched out toward me. I dropped the cart. "This isn't funny." My voice cracked, echoing uselessly. The intercom above me crackled to life, static hissing through the speakers. I froze. A voice slid through, distorted, low. "Don't leave him behind." My stomach dropped. Those words, they weren't random. They weren't some prank. They were mine. 15 years earlier, I'd screamed them into the snow. I'd been 23, driving with my little brother Eli during a storm up in the Cascades. We'd lost control, spun out, crashed into a ditch. I crawled out of that car with blood on my face and glass in my arms. Eli didn't. I screamed at the paramedics as they pulled me back. Don't leave him behind. They did. He never woke up. Hearing those words now in that empty store ripped me open all over again. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I bolted toward the exit, skidding on the wet floor, lungs burning. The automatic doors groaned, sliding open inches at a time like they didn't want to let me go. Rain slammed against my face as I stumbled outside, half blind from the storm. Behind me, the store lights flickered, dimming and brightening like a heartbeat. I fumbled for my keys, fingers slipping on the wet metal. When I finally jammed them into the lock, I risked a glance back. The sliding doors were wide open. The store was empty, but the red jacket was there, neatly draped across the threshold. I stood frozen in the rain, watching the fabric flutter in the storm. My chest tightened until I thought my ribs would snap. I forced myself into the car, slammed the door shut, and locked it twice. My breath fogged the windows as I sat shaking, headlights glaring at the slick pavement. When I finally pulled away, the jacket was still there, a red slash against the gray storm. That night, Leah asked me why I looked pale, why my hands trembled when I set my fork down. I lied. Long day. But later, as I walked past the living room, I froze. Wet footprints stretched across the carpet. Small, bare, leading from the front door toward the stairs. I followed them, hard in my throat, but they vanished halfway up, like someone had stopped mid-step. Leah asked if I'd tracked in water. I nodded, too scared to speak, but I knew. I hadn't. For weeks after, the whisper stayed with me. In the car, in the shower, sometimes even in my dreams I'd hear it. Don't leave him behind. Every time I drove down Rainier Avenue, I felt it again. The pull of that store. The weight of that unfinished night in the snowstorm 15 years ago. I stopped going to Target. I stopped telling Leah the truth. I started drinking more. Anything to quiet the memory. But it didn't work. The voice always found me. One night I stood at the window watching the rain streak the glass. My reflection stared back, pale and worn. For a moment I swore I saw another figure behind me. Smaller, shoulders slouched, a face I hadn't seen since I was 23. Eli, I whispered. The room stayed silent, but I knew he was there, and I knew he wasn't leaving. Not until I faced what I'd tried to bury. Running from guilt doesn't erase it. Ignoring the past doesn't silence it. The things we leave unresolved, the promises broken, the people lost, find ways to follow us no matter how far we run. Healing comes only when we face them, not when we hide. When I look back on that September evening, I wish I could say I was calm, collected, the kind of mother who always has a plan. But that wouldn't be the truth. The truth is, I was exhausted. Marriage unraveling, work draining me dry. 2 kids who seemed to fight more than they breathed. I thought I was holding it together, but really, I was just patching holes in a ship already sinking. Derek and I had been in a rough patch for months. Money was tight, tighter than I let the kids see. He was working late hours, claiming he needed the overtime, but I suspected he also wanted to avoid me. Every argument circled back to the same themes. He said I was too controlling. I said he was never there. Neither of us really listened. That night I had begged him to meet us at Target after work. Just one evening where I didn't have to wrangle the kids alone. His text came through just as I was pulling into the parking lot. Running late. Just start without me. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, then shoved the phone back in my bag. I told myself not to cry, not with the kids in the back seat. Inside the store, the cool air hit us like a wall, the smell of popcorn from the cafe drifting over. Jonah was already sulking, Sophie humming some nonsense tune at the top of her lungs. The cart rattled as I pushed them toward groceries. "Stop kicking me," Jonah hissed. "Mom, he's being mean." Sophie whined, her voice sharp enough to cut through my skull. "Both of you, enough," I muttered. "Just let me finish." But peace was never in the cards that night. Not for me. I first noticed her in the cleaning supplies aisle. A woman in her late 40s maybe, wearing oversized sunglasses despite being indoors, and a pale scarf knotted around her neck. At first glance, nothing remarkable. Chicago is full of characters. But she lingered. Too close. Too still. I turned the corner and there she was again in clothing, her hand brushing hangers as if pretending to browse. I chalked it up to coincidence. Stores are big, but people often end up on similar paths. It wasn't until I hit the snacks aisle that my skin began to prickle. There she was again. Same scarf, same sunglasses, same head tilted ever so slightly in my direction. She never had a cart, never carried items, just floated aisle to aisle like a shadow. "Weird," I muttered under my breath. By the time we reached toys, Sophie tugged my sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, her little finger pointing, "that lady's here again." I forced a smile, crouching low. "It's a big store, honey, coincidence." My voice sounded steady, but my chest felt tight. When I glanced back, the woman had vanished. Still, unease coiled in my stomach like a knot. I told myself to shake it off, to keep moving. But mothers know when something isn't right. And I knew. At checkout, the line was long, kids tugging at candy bars, scanners beeping in steady rhythm. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it all, stress and fatigue making me paranoid. Then I glanced up. The convex security mirror above the register reflected the whole row of lanes. And there she was, 3 registers away. No items in her hands, just standing, and staring directly at us through those sunglasses. My throat went dry. I leaned down to Jonah, whispering so only he could hear. "Grab Sophie's hand, don't let go, we're going straight to the car." He nodded, eyes wide. He must have felt it too, the wrongness. As we pushed through the sliding doors, the muggy night air hit us like a wall. I could hear footsteps behind us. Slow, deliberate. "Mom?" Jonah's voice trembled. "Just keep walking," I said, forcing my legs to move faster, scanning the lot for our car. Then my heart sank. My keys weren't in my bag. I tore through it, panic rising. How could I be so careless? The footsteps grew closer. She wasn't rushing. That was the worst part. Whoever she wasn't frantic or clumsy. She walked with the kind of confidence that made my skin crawl, as if she knew exactly how this would end. "Mom, hurry," Sophie whispered, clutching Jonah's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. I spun, ready to scream for help, but just then headlights swept across the lot. Derek's car pulled up, horn blaring once. He rolled down the window, confusion written all over his face. "Nat? What's going on?" Relief flooded me so fast I nearly collapsed. I shoved the kids toward him. "Get in, now!" Jonah scrambled into the back seat, dragging Sophie with him. I slammed the door shut and yelled, "Drive, just drive." Derek blinked, glancing from me to the empty lot. "What? Please." My voice cracked. He didn't argue after that. The tires screeched as we pulled away, my chest heaving, hands shaking. When I finally dared to look back, she was gone. The lot stretched out empty under the flickering streetlights, as if she'd melted into the shadows. Only faint footprints marked the damp pavement where she had stood. That night, Derek tried to laugh it off. Maybe she was just strange. Chicago's full of weird people. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But deep down, I knew this wasn't random. It wasn't just a strange woman in sunglasses. It was the way she moved, silent, deliberate. The way she kept appearing where we were, no matter how many turns we made. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the paranoia. Every time I took the kids to Target, or anywhere really, my eyes darted to mirrors, to corners, to faces that lingered too long. Sometimes when I tucked Sophie in at night, she'd whisper, "Mom, is that lady coming back?" I never had the courage to answer. Derek told me I was overreacting, that I let stress get the better of me. But sometimes, late at night, I'd stand at the window staring at the quiet street outside, half convinced I'd see sunglasses glinting under a street lamp. I never did. But I've learned that absence doesn't always mean safety. We tell ourselves that danger announces itself loudly, that evil looks obvious. But sometimes it's quiet, ordinary, dressed in scarves and sunglasses. Trusting your instincts, especially when it comes to your children, is not paranoia. It's survival. Better to act and be wrong than to stay silent and regret it forever. Most people assume working overnight security at a Target is the definition of boring. And to be fair, for the first year I worked there, it mostly was. I walked the aisles, checked doors, watched cameras. The scariest thing I dealt with was the occasional raccoon in the dumpster. After a few years of breaking up bar fights, dodging knives, and bouncing drunk guys twice my size, Target was like semi-retirement. My girlfriend Lila always teased me about it. "Easiest paycheck you've ever earned, right?" She'd laugh. And I'd grin, throw my feet up on the couch, and tell her, "Baby, it's literally walking in circles until sunrise. They should be paying me for staying awake." But on May 19th, 2021, something shifted. It was just past 11, an hour after closing. The stalkers had left early because corporate decided to cut hours. That left me as the only warm body inside the building. I didn't mind. Quiet meant less hassle. I poured myself a coffee in the break room, then wandered back to the monitors. The feeds flickered, static breaking across the screen. Aisle 14 went black. I frowned, tapped the side of the monitor. Nothing. "Loose wire," I muttered, grabbing my flashlight. Target is a strange place when it's empty. During the day it's chaos, kids screaming, carts squeaking, registers chiming. But at night the silence hangs heavy, like the whole place is holding its breath. Even the freezers seemed muffled, their usual hum swallowed by the quiet. As I passed the toy section, my radio crackled. At first I thought it was interference, then I heard it. Breathing. Ragged. Too close to the mic. "Dispatch, you copy?" I said, pressing the button. No answer, just that steady breathing. Then came the whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but it was low, curling through the static like smoke. The hairs on my neck stood up. I wasn't supposed to be hearing anyone. There was no dispatch. There was no one else. That was the first time I felt something was really wrong. I followed the sound, sweeping my flashlight along the aisles. Every beam stretched into shadows that seemed thicker than they should have been. That's when I saw it. A red Target uniform jacket crumpled in the middle of the floor, as if someone had just shrugged it off. The fabric was damp, maybe from the rain tracked in earlier, but when I crouched and touched it, it wasn't just damp. It was warm. My mouth went dry. "Hello?" I called, my voice bouncing off the shelves. "Store's closed. If you're still in here, I need you to come out." No reply. Then my flashlight flickered. The beam danced and bent like the batteries were dying, though I'd replaced them the night before. And at the far end of the aisle, I saw it. A figure. Tall, shoulders hunched forward, head tilted down so I couldn't see its face. "Hey!" I shouted, voice sharp to mask the tremor. "Store's closed! Who are you?" The figure didn't move. I raised my flashlight higher, but the light seemed to bend around it like the shadows refused to give it up. My heart pounded in my ears. My hand slid toward the baton at my hip. "Last warning," I barked. And then it vanished. Not turned a corner, not ran away. Vanished. One blink it was there, the next. Nothing but the empty aisle stretching ahead. I stood frozen, gripping the baton so tight my knuckles burned. My breath came short and shallow, like I'd been sprinting. I forced myself back toward the security room. I needed the cameras. Proof. When I pulled up the feed from aisle 14, I felt my stomach twist. The footage showed me, flashlight raised, yelling into the aisle. But there was no one there. Just me. I didn't tell anyone at first. Who would believe me? A bouncer turned security guard seeing boogeymen in the aisles. Management already thought I was coasting on the easiest shifts. Still, the next night, I kept my eyes sharper. I told myself it had been stress, fatigue, imagination. But at exactly the same time, 11:15, the radio crackled again, the same ragged breathing. "Stop messing with me," I muttered, gripping the walkie. "If this is some kind of joke, cut it out." The reply was another whisper. This time, I caught 3 words. "Behind you, Marcus." I spun so fast my flashlight clattered against the shelf. Nothing. But when I turned back, the red jacket was there again. Same crumpled heap, right in the middle of the aisle. The nights blurred together after that. Every shift, the jacket appeared. Sometimes near toys, sometimes in groceries. Once, folded neatly on a bench in the fitting room as if waiting for me. I started losing sleep, jerking awake at home with the sound of that breathing in my ears. Lila noticed. "You look like hell," she said one morning, her hand brushing my cheek. "Are you eating? Sleeping?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just long nights." But I wasn't fine. I was unraveling. By the 3rd week, I stopped pretending it was random. The figure wanted me to see it, wanted me to react. That night, the monitors flickered again. I leaned in close, trying to catch the static. And then I froze. The feed showed me, hunched in the chair. And over my shoulder, just behind me, stood the figure. I whipped around so fast my chair toppled. The room was empty. My own ragged breath filled the silence. I stared at the door, half expecting it to swing open. The radio crackled once more. "Closer," the voice whispered. That was it. I grabbed my keys, marched straight to the manager's office, and wrote a report. Everything I'd seen, everything I'd heard. I needed it on paper. The next morning, I handed it to my boss. She read it, eyebrows raised. Then she smirked. "Long shifts get in your head. Try more coffee, less imagination." I wanted to argue, but what good would it do? She'd already made up her mind. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't coffee or imagination. It was something else. Something that had chosen me. I stayed. Maybe I should have quit. Lila begged me to. "Marcus, this isn't worth it. You're not sleeping. You're not eating. You're jumpy all the time. Just walk away." But I didn't. Some part of me wanted answers. And that's when the game changed. The figure didn't linger in aisles anymore. It started drifting closer to the security room. Every night, a little nearer to the door. One night I watched the monitor and saw it standing just outside, its shadow stretching across the tile. My hand hovered over the lock, but I couldn't move. Then the screen flickered. For one brief, agonizing second, I saw the feed not of the hall, but of myself, slumped in the chair. And behind me, leaning so close its shape blurred into mine, was the figure. When the screen returned to normal, I was alone. I'm still here, still working. Maybe I shouldn't be. But every night I sit in that chair staring at those monitors, waiting. Because whatever it isn't done with me yet. We convince ourselves that fear only belongs in dark alleys or dangerous streets. But the truth is, it can live in the quiet places we think are safe. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It just gives it room to get closer.